The turbulent sound of an unseen battle rings from the darkness of Weston Archer's muted senses. Only half an hour prior, the photographer was struck by a bullet intended for Jazmine, which he leapt before in an attempt to save the model from a deadly fate. Yet he survived. Weston slowly returns to consciousness. The commotion that roused him screeches to a halt, and the first sensation he is able to process is the texture of his own vest. Running his hand across his heart, Weston can feel the small hole piercing his pocket. Within sits an untouched photograph which he removes and beholds. A picture of the construction site's steel girders, a Polaroid labeled Location 5, Shot 2, one of the many he had taken while location scouting for the shoot. Curiously, this photograph saved his life by mysteriously deflecting the bullet that would have taken it, a bullet which now lies shattered in pieces surrounding him. Likewise, his precious professional camera that initially spied the sniper has been dashed into pieces. Only his personal Polaroid camera remains intact, still slung around his neck. Now able to move his body, Weston picks himself up and shuffles to his feet, only for them to tumble into a bizarre sight. The corpse of a large patchwork man in a bowler hat lying in a puddle of water. It was in fact the same fortunate son who threatened their lives, though Weston knows not the identity of the man before him. Still, he hazards a guess.
The one who was attacking us?
Weston wonders out loud. He observes that the puddle the man was face down in was electrified by a telephone pole wire, the pole itself rammed by a taxicab, a curious Rube Goldberg machine of death. As he takes in more of his surroundings, his eyes struggle to focus from the throbbing pain in the back of his head. A blurry figure moves in the darkness of the overcast sky. To aid in his returning vision, Weston grabs his Polaroid camera and aims it at the unknown sight. Shifting the camera's focus, he discovers yet another mysterious figure. But this one was a thin man with greasy dark hair carrying something into the back of a van. When the figure turns around, the photographer discovers that the thing the stranger was carrying was Jazmine herself. Weston is startled and deliberates for a moment before inevitably snapping the picture. Optics shuts the door to his van and starts the engine, stealing away with Jazmine in tow. The strange kidnapper makes a hasty retreat, leaving the battlefield behind and taking his prize in the midst of the confusion. Weston flinches upon hearing frantically approaching footsteps, a familiar voice calling out.
Jazmine!
He turns to see Alexa desperately scanning the area for a glimpse of her comrade. Their eyes meet, and the foreign model quickly runs up to him, disheveled and without her usual air of confidence.
Weston!
She shouts.
Have you seen JoJo? I told her to wait for me, but I haven't found her anywhere.
Weston hangs his head wordlessly, and Alexa stares in horror as the reality she feared sinks in. He rips out the curious tab emerging from his camera, staring at the undeveloped photograph still shielded and wrapped in its developing film.
I could show you, but with the temperature as cold as it is from the rain, this photo will take some time to develop.
Her eyes sharpen, glaring at the taller man.
What do you...
Police sirens begin wailing in the distance, interrupting and startling her. In response to this, Weston hides the photograph within his vest, protecting their secret evidence from prying eyes.
And time isn't a luxury we have right now. Meet me for brunch tomorrow at Cafe Royale and we can swap information.
Click. Weston looks up to see Alexis Makarov pointed directly between his eyes.
And what makes you think you have bargaining power?
He lifts his hands instinctively to insist on his own innocence, but his voice is earnest and empathetic as he admits.
With what's been going on, I don't blame either of you for being so secretive. But even I can see that the pot's boiling over.
In the distance, Upman can be heard speaking to the officers that have arrived on the scene. His volume rises and shifts in tone, as though to produce a warning to Alexa of their incoming intrusion.
I have several employees on the site who can provide testimony, including my lead model, Alexa Lifeson. I told her to wait for me at the Benton Hotel around the corner.
Alexa grits her teeth, catching the hint, but she stares down the photographer nonetheless. Finally, he pleads with her.
We're on the same side. I only want to see JoJo return to us.
One of the private eyes emerges from a nearby building, having been secretly activated this entire time. Its silence reveals the sincerity behind Weston's words, and her arm falls. Not a syllable of what he said was a lie. It was all true. She's gone. The police interrogation was swift but ultimately fruitless. With no injuries sustained, all the officers managed to do was file a missing persons report on Jazmine and agree to an investigation into any possible parties responsible for the last 2 threats on the magazine. To anyone on the outside, it appeared like the serious handling of a crime scene. But to someone like Eloise, all too familiar with the act of going through the motions with no investment, it was clear that this was nothing but a charade. Everyone was allowed to leave and go about their lives, however shaken they may now be. Much of the crew quit on the spot, swearing up and down that they would never work for the magazine again. As the sun began to set and the evening rolled in, all that remained were Weston, Alexa, Sunny, and Eloise herself. And ever concerned about business, Upman insisted that they all return to Maison Tower for an important staff meeting. The ride back in the limousine was silent as Eloise observed Alexa shooting daggers at Weston every moment he dared look up from his twiddling thumbs. The tension there was palpable enough to even quiet Sunny beside her. Theodore is the first to greet them outside of the building and is immediately overcome with distress, pulling at his hair as he assesses the damage to his work. However minute it actually appeared to be.
No. I know the point of this line is durability, girls, but that doesn't mean you can just go and play in the dirt. Look at you, Sonny. Oil stains, you know. Did you crawl under a car? For God's sake, Alexa, is that blood leaking out of your boot? And Eloise, didn't I ask you not to smoke for this shoot? Now's not the time, Theodore.
Upman grumbles, pushing past the manic designer to enter the lobby.
Welcome back, everyone.
A sheepish Mina welcomes. Behind her, a fully grown horse follows in her shadow. It whinnies in the speechless silence. Upman is mortified by the presence of the creature and sighs in exasperation.
And this is exactly why we need to have everyone sit down and talk through what the hell just happened.
The company president snaps his fingers loudly and commands his staff's attention.
Everyone right now needs to be in my office in the next 10 minutes or else I'm firing all of you.
Without another word, Upman marches toward the elevator, leaving behind his employees, who stare back and forth at one another in an exhausted confusion. He enters the elevator and looks back, only to lock eyes again with the horse next to Mina. He takes a deep breath, massaging the knot in his furrowed brow before holding the elevator doors open from within to shout back.
Except for you, Mina. You go and get that damn thing sorted out. Theo can fill me in on whatever nonsense happened here.
Yes, sir.
She nods, tilting her head to think quickly of a solution.
I guess she can go live on the farm.
Sunny gasps.
You're not gonna kill her, are you? Heavens no!
Mina responds in equivalent horror.
I meant my parents' farm.
Eloise rolls her eyes at Sunny's relief as Theodore places a gentle hand on Mina's shoulder.
Will you be all right then?
He asks, clearly alluding to something between only them.
More secrets.
Eloise realizes. Mina nods in assurance.
Of course. Go ahead.
Theodore smiles and pats the younger girl's head before following the silent Weston up to Upman's office. Sunny grabs Eloise's hand and begins leading her to the elevator.
Let's go follow the boys then, Elo.
However, Eloise's attention is stolen by Alexa, who is drawn out of her personal daze by Mina's own hand.
A moment, Alexa?
Narrowing her eyes, Eloise pulls Sunny aside and out of sight to observe the covert interaction. Before the bright-eyed model can protest, Eloise shushes her and points to the floating robot exchanging tapes between the two women's foreheads.
Even the secretary.
Eloise hisses under her breath.
Mina has one of those stand thingies?
Sunny whispers, confused.
More than just a stand, Charlie. Secrets.
Upman exhales heavily before finally addressing his star designer.
That's it then? A jilted lover broke up with you via onerous horse?
Theodore's lying smile doesn't fade, only growing brighter at the summary of his story.
Precisely. Forget I asked.
Upman taps the ash from his cigar and turns his attention to the socially averse photographer at his left.
Weston, what do you think? Do we need to reshoot anything?
Startled, Weston jumps up in his seat under his employer's gaze, but quickly recovers from being called upon. He clears his throat and replies.
Oh, of course. Well, I won't know for sure until we develop the film, but I think we were able to get everything we needed before the, weather interrupted us.
Weather?
Eloise stamps her foot as she stands in an outrage.
So that is the lie we're supposed to swallow?
Weston rubs the back of his neck, uncomfortable by the sudden conflict.
Well...
Poised, Alexa takes the reins of the conversation.
I don't think Mr. Upman quite cares about what interrupted the shoot, so let's just say it's not important for now.
Eloise clenches her fist.
Not important. And who exactly are you to say what is and is not important?
Alexa sits up straight and pridefully places a hand to her chest to claim her authority.
Maison's one and only top model, Alexa Lifeson. You asked me before to do my job, did you not? Then sit down, Eloise.
Before she can lift a hand to Alexa, however, another gently reaches for her.
No!
Sunny says firmly, standing beside her ally.
Elo is right! You can't expect us to just accept that what happened today was just the weather, the bomb threat, the traps, that beefeater creep! We have enough to worry about with the square biz killer!
The office goes quiet. The elephant in the room now addressed, there was no denying or hiding the looming threat that was on the back of everyone else's minds. Weston and Theodore look down at the floor helplessly, and Alexa shifts in her seat under the intense gaze of both her fellow models. Despite it going against her very nature to linger on the negative, Sunny held her ground next to Eloise. The tension, however, is quickly cut by a different air of hostility, as Dior Lancôme enters Upman's office without warning. She pays no heed to the others in the room and marches straight up to the desk of her superior, placing a cool but irate hand upon his desk to lean in and lock eyes into his.
And when were you planning on telling me about this meeting, Ashton?
Upman rolls his eyes, reaching for the folder underneath Dior's hand and yanking it out from under her so that she's forced to stand up straight before him.
Why bother telling you when you always manage to crawl your way in regardless?
He mutters, standing up and turning his back on the room to look over the folder's contents. Dior huffs and turns on her heel to look around the room.
What have I told you girls about making faces? You'll wrinkle and be out of work in a month looking like that.
That certainly explains what happened to you,
Upman remarks before turning back toward the group.
Let's go on and get down to brass tacks, shall we? We're on a tight schedule, and after the last few days of shenanigans, we're about to wind up into overtime, and you know how I feel about that.
Weston, who often did little more than keep his head down and nod when spoken to during business meetings, abruptly looks up at Upman and sputters.
But how are we supposed to finish the issue without JoJo? Wait, without JoJo?
Theodore replies, looking first to Weston out of confusion before fully absorbing his ally's absence. Dior scoffs, observing the lack of the blonde for herself.
That's right. I'd not even noticed the disappearance of that ratty-haired little germ. Where is JoJo?
Unfortunately, after the accident on location today, JoJo hasn't resurfaced.
Upman says with a sigh.
A missing persons report has been filed with the police for the sake of formality, and they'll be searching for her in the meantime, but I'm not exactly worried. The girl grew up on the streets of Chicago. I'm certain she's able to take care of herself and make her way back to work soon enough. As for business, we have a deadline to meet, and I intend to keep it. I'll have Mina make official adjustments to the schedule when she returns in the morning, but I'll want you girls to finish your individual shoots first. We'll push JoJo's to the very end of the schedule, but if she's not back in the next 24 hours, I'll be calling in a backup model to wrap up.
Weston, Sunny, and Alexa express their surprise in unison.
Replace JoJo?
A backup model?
Theodore explodes.
Last minute? Are you out of your mind? My designs were made explicitly for JoJo's proportions and look. You can't just throw any drab model into those pieces.
As much as I hate to agree with the fairy, I think he is right. We should just cut JoJo and our losses altogether. I told you when you hired her, Ashton. She was a wasted investment.
Chides Dior.
Oh, stuff it, you jealous old has-been. Age with some damn grace, would you?
Hopman, you can't be serious about replacing JoJo. She's a vital member of the team.
Alexa pleads, but Eloise narrows her eyes at the slip-up.
So, vital members of the team keep secrets from the rest of us.
Or are we not a part of that team? You know, of all the people in this room I expected to act like such a petulant child, you are not one of them, Eloise. When it is your business, you will be included.
When it involves my life and my livelihood, it is very much my business.
The point is to not involve your life, you miserable little...
Please, stop fighting!
Sunny finds herself standing between the two women preparing to square off in the middle of Upman's office.
Enough!
Ashton Upman's voice rings louder than ever before as he slams a hand onto his desk, bringing the room once again into an uncomfortable silence. His hair having fallen into his face, he takes a steady breath to swipe it back into place before continuing through gritted teeth.
Let me let you all in on a little trade secret. Always have a backup plan. JoJo isn't the only model with a backup. If you'll recall a little thing called the Square Biz murders, I've been losing models left and right. As a business owner, I have had to prepare. Not a single one of you is irreplaceable. Got that? If even one of you continues to waste my time, well...
Upman lets that threat hang in the air, his eyes scanning each expression until they fold in submission. Satisfied, he stands back up straight and continues.
JoJo's backup model is Henrietta Morgan. Her measurements are exactly the same to the millimeter, so you shouldn't need to do any extra work, Theo. Whatever her look needs to match what you've been doing can be done with makeup. I expect you all here on time tomorrow. If you don't show, I'll assume you've quit and proceed from there. Now get out of my sight.
A new day begins. Sunny looks about nervously, clutching Eloise's sleeve tight and drawing in even closer. The invasion of personal space, however, doesn't seem to bother her companion, as her attention is hyper-focused on the entrance to Maison, waiting for her target to appear.
Hello? Is this really a good idea? Your shoot's in an hour, and I don't think Upman was kidding yesterday when he said he'd replace us.
There she is.
Eloise mutters under her breath, eyeing Alexa exit the building. The woman doesn't hesitate as she makes her way across the street, and when she clears the corner, Eloise abandons Sunny to follow. Suddenly, a floating satellite appears.
Stand.
Eloise realizes, calling upon Witchy Woman instinctively and tossing it out of sight. The summer dream of Eloise tracking Alexa disappears before Private Eyes detects its presence, and the real Eloise returns next to Sunny with a sigh of frustration.
Merde. I should have known she'd have a stand.
Well, so do I.
Sunny says, taking Eloise's hand confidently and leading her back toward Alexa's tracks. She calls on Soulful Strut to slap a sticker on the sidewalk and crouches down to speak to the pavement.
The really tall, pretty lady that just walked across you. Where is she going?
Sunny asks. The sticker whispers back.
She's heading towards Cafe Royale.
Sunny beams up at Eloise, who takes Witchy Woman from atop her head and drops it beside her. And from underneath the brim of her hat, an entirely new face greets her.
Hello?
Sunny gasps, looking the new woman up and down.
The one and only.
The familiar voice replies, but it doesn't match her face at all. The Eloise Sunny had come to know and love appeared before her as a bright-eyed and long-haired beauty. She is completely unrecognizable from head to toe, sporting a flowing white summer dress, curly blonde hair, and sun-kissed skin.
A version of myself that underwent plastic surgery for her career.
That's brilliant! There's no way Alexa will know that it's you. But
Sunny presses a pensive finger to her lips.
your voice.
A mischievous smirk curls at the edge of Eloise's new lips.
That is where you come in, no?
Through a window, Alexa spots Weston at the back of the cafe where they promised to meet, and clenches her jaw. While he'd certainly been playing the part of ally, his bargaining with critical information was a thorn in her side. Alexa had spent all night after Upman's meeting scouring the scene of Jazmine's disappearance for clues, but there wasn't a single trace left behind. Not even Private Eyes had been able to detect a sign of the young woman's former presence at the site. It was as though her entire existence had been wiped from that day. Each hour that passed without Jazmine only served to put Alexa more on edge. On top of that, she couldn't rule out the possibility that Weston himself was a suspect and a possible stand user. She would have to approach this entire conversation with extreme caution. If he were to be questioned too directly, if he were to catch Private Eyes and realize he was under scrutiny, he would most assuredly become uncooperative, and her one and only lead to Jazmine would be lost. She pushes a paper note deeper into her coat pockets, a secret weapon of intel gifted by her newest ally, Mina. With a deep, cautious breath, Alexa opens the door to the cafe and walks straight toward the open seat across from Weston in his booth. The man looks up from his camera with a casual smile, but doesn't make direct eye contact.
Good morning. Or afternoon, rather. I assume Duffy was especially pushy today.
The usual leering and gawking. I'm sure you know I can handle your average creep.
She answers coolly, alluding to their confrontation from before. Weston clears his throat.
Right, of course.
He gestures to the nearby waitress, who approaches the table before Alexa can begin.
What can I get for you, miss? Weston here's a regular, but said he wanted to wait for you.
What a gentleman. I'll just have a coffee, please. Black.
Sure thing. I'll start a fresh pot just for you both.
Thanks, Sal.
Weston says as the waitress heads back to the kitchen.
No cream or sugar either. I guess you are still a model after all. Have to watch that figure.
Alexa impatiently leans in and keeps her voice low.
The photo should be developed by now. Let's see it then.
Weston sighs, but matches her tone regardless.
I want to show you, and I will. But first, I need you to come clean about some things.
You're becoming quite a pest, you know that?
Alexa admits, sliding back in her seat and reverting to shooting glares his way. He smiles awkwardly, but doesn't say anything, waiting expectantly for her to give in. Inevitably, she does.
Fine. Ask away.
Thank you, Alexa. Really.
He sits back up, but continues to keep their conversation private.
Yesterday, I took a bullet for JoJo from a sniper outside of the Benton Hotel. Before that, the construction site was sabotaged, and you went after that strange security guard. I don't think it's stupid of me to assume these things are connected.
No, it's quite clever, actually. You've been paying attention.
I pay attention to a lot of things,
Weston confesses, looking back at his camera.
and I find that the details matter.
He shifts his gaze to lock eyes with Alexa, pleading.
What is going on?
Alexa can see the pain in his eyes, clear as day, as he fights to overcome his fear of looking at her. It manages to elicit enough sympathy from her that she can feel some of her guard soften. But she chooses her next words carefully nonetheless.
JoJo is unfortunately in a lot of danger. And not just because she's missing. She was a CIA agent investigating the Square Biz killer before she was abandoned after the night of the party. Her mission compromised from the attack on Maison, her superiors ordered a hit to take her out. That security guard and the sniper you're referring to were CIA assassins.
I don't figure you're CIA too in that case.
She shakes her head.
KGB. When I realized her government used her, I chose to look out for her.
Alexa grits her teeth as she watches Weston process the limited information she chose to give him. He nods, seeming to make a decision.
Okay, I believe you, but there's something I still don't follow.
She doesn't respond, and he takes that as a sign that he's going to have to pry it out of her.
If the CIA were just looking to squash a failed detective, I have to believe they'd be a bit more, well, subtle about it. This all seems a bit much.
I suspect it has something to do with meeting me. I'm not exactly their ally.
Fair point. But then, what does the KGB want with Maison?
Alexa's breath catches.
He took the bait.
She recalls the note in her pocket from Mina explaining what she had learned from her encounter with Jaeger, conveyed secretly in Cyrillic scribbles she had learned from Alexa via her stand. If Weston was the Square Biz killer, there was an abundance of caution she had to take to keep him from catching on to her suspicion. And based on this new information from Mina, there was only one question she could possibly ask without setting off his alarms.
Tell me, Weston, the night of the party, did you drink the wine?
The question startles him, but not in a way that seems to outright bother him.
That's a bit off topic.
Don't worry, I'll explain. But I'd like to know.
Well, yes, I did. Just like everyone at Maison.
Private Eyes is silent, and Alexa finds the tension in her shoulders start to relax. According to Mina, anyone who drank the wine at the party and survived was exposed to Gypsy Eyes for the first time. If Weston had been the Square Biz killer, the party would have been his fatal double dose. But because he was able to sit before her here and now, there was no way he could possibly be their serial killer.
So then, You have a stand.
She muses.
Stand?
After the party, you must have felt rather ill, but suddenly you started exhibiting some sort of strange abilities, perhaps?
Oh! He exclaims. Reaching into his breast pocket, Weston pulls out a few photos and lays them on the table.
You mean moving pictures?
He turns over a photo of a steel beam and taps it, and the sound of metal reverberates back. Alexa looks closely at the photo and sees a dent the size of a bullet on the smaller-than-life beam in the image.
This is what saved my life yesterday. Some of the photos I take with my Polaroid seem to retain the properties of their subject matter. At my volition, at least.
He picks up two photos placed against each other and pulls them apart to show her. One image is that of a roaring fire labeled Campfire Number 2, while the other is of an ice block with the name Fish Market Ice scrawled below. He carefully moves the photos in close to her.
Feel that?
Sure enough, the appropriate temperature radiates outside of the pictures.
I see.
Alexa observes, and Weston places the photos against each other once more to store them back against his chest.
Yes, that would be because of the result of your stand. The wine was laced with a government secret called Gypsy Ice, a psychoactive agent that causes these abilities to manifest. I was assigned here to find it.
So that's why they're targeting Maison and JoJo.
Yes, so you understand why we might not have wanted this to get out any further.
Speaking of JoJo,
Weston nods and retrieves another photo from his person. He hands it to Alexa somberly.
I'm sorry for keeping this from you for so long. But this is the photo I took of her being taken away. I don't think this guy's a CIA assassin.
Alexa gasps in recognition at Jasmine's captor.
Optics.
She mutters.
Sorry for the wait.
The waitress says, placing down 2 mugs of piping hot coffee before Weston can question Alexa further.
Wanted to make sure it was fresh. You sure you didn't want anything else, miss?
Yes, that's all, thank you.
All right. I'll have your meal out here in a sec, Wes.
The two sit in silence for a moment as Alexa continues to look over the photo, private eyes looming over her shoulder to take in every last detail possible. Weston watches wordlessly for a moment before speaking back up.
I guess that's your stand?
Alexa is startled to realize she'd completely let her guard down and revealed her stand to a potential enemy before remembering that Weston had already cleared himself of suspicion.
Yes, much less interesting than moving pictures, I'm afraid. Private Eyes is more of an extra investigative tool for me.
Weston smiles and reaches for his mug.
I think it's very interesting. A good detective and a stand like that should be just what we need to get JoJo back.
That it is.
Alexa agrees, and she looks back down at the table toward her own cup of coffee when something abnormal comes up on Private Eyes' scan. She leans in close to the edge of her cup to discover crystals of sugar on her otherwise black cup of coffee.
One last question, Weston. Did you order sugar in your coffee?
Weston pauses to look at his drink.
No,
He answers.
but it looks like Sally forgot. Oh, well, it's just a little sugar.
Without pause, Alexa slaps the coffee mug from Weston's hands before he can take a single sip.
That coffee is poisoned!
She shouts. A chill runs down Alexa's spine, her heart beating in her chest as she stands and prepares for the battle she knows is coming. A completely confused and worried Weston looks up to her as she warns him.
Tchaikovsky is here.
If you had a dream, did it happen? If you stop and think for a little while, try to make a face as it once were real. Even though it seemed like a lifetime, wasn't really more than a short ride, but it left me memories that time can't steal. Oh, Miracle sky, gold leaves, reflections on the ocean, yeah. We're lost in the light, like sand in the shade.
says an oddly chipper voice to the waitress. Sally looks at the strange but beautiful customer seated a few booths away from Weston and his date. The woman does not look up from her wide-brimmed sun hat as she gives her order, but Sally jots it down nonetheless.
Will that be all?
Yes, thank you.
Eloise rolls her eyes at the sticker Sunny had placed on her hat to disguise her voice, but otherwise listens closely to the conversation being had in hushed tones behind her. It's all almost too much to take in. Government secrets, CIA assassins, and to top it all off, everything she was coming to learn about stands. It all seemed so ridiculous, and yet it all now made sense.
Aloe! Aloe, look outside! It's snowing!
The sticker from her hat whispers giddily.
It's the middle of summer, Sherry.
Eloise hisses back, trying to keep her attention on Alexa's voice.
No, really, Aloe, it's snowing out here. Turn around!
Eloise looks out the window, and sure enough, snow appears to be falling from the sky and collecting on the streets.
That coffee is poisoned!
Alexa shouts, knocking the coffee from Weston's hands. Eloise turns back to look toward Alexa and see her anxiously stand up from the booth. Something deep inside her gut tells her exactly what is going on.
Understand, user.
Get out of there!
Shouts the sticker, mimicking Sunny's own apprehension as she catches on from her post outside the cafe.
Let's not get wrapped up in another fight, Aloe. Please.
But
Whatever Alexa's getting into, we can worry about that later. No, come on.
Flakes of crystalline snow fall before Eloise's eyes, and she looks up to see it begin to cover the cafe floor. With a heavy sigh, she decides to abandon the scene per Sunny's advice, and slips out the door using Witchy Woman to remain undetected by Alexa and her private eyes.